and we will show the galaxy what happens when you train soldiers to pick up their rifles and try again. The academy transformed into a fortress in 48 hours. Every training ground became a defensive position. Every building a strong point. 10,000 students who came here to learn warfare were about to experience it for real. Tail stood before them in the main assembly hall. Valkyrie, Shardborn, Deepcallers, Verdants, and 8 other species filled the massive space. Some looked terrified. Others looked determined. All of them were young and not fully trained. You all came here to become soldiers, Tail began. His voice carried through the translation system so every species could understand. You came to learn, to grow stronger, to prepare for war. Now war has come to you before you were ready. He paused, letting his words settle. The coalition command wants us to evacuate. They think you cannot win this fight. They are probably right. The Ravagers outnumber us badly. Many of you will not survive. I will not lie to you about that. The hall was absolutely silent. Every eye focused on the human kernel. But I believe in you. I believe in what we have built here. I believe that when you drop your rifle, you know how to pick it up and try again. I believe that when your battle partner falls, you will stand for them. I believe that together we are stronger than we are alone. Tail looked across the crowd. This is your choice. Anyone who wants to evacuate can do so now. No shame, no judgment. We have transport ships ready. Nobody moved. 10,000 students stood firm. A young Valkyrie named Jero raised his paw. Sir, we may not be fully trained, but we learned enough. We learned from the best. We will hold this academy. Cheers erupted. A Shardburn's crystalline body pulsed with determined light patterns. A Deepcaller's sonar clicked in rhythmic agreement. The species who normally never fought together now stood united. Lieutenant Raish stepped forward. Instructors, move to your assigned positions. Students, report to your unit leaders. We have 36 hours until the Ravagers arrive. Let us make them count. The defensive preparations were intense. Major Hyjin coordinated shield generators and heavy weapons emplacements. Staff Sergeant Dongwu organized ammunition distribution. Lieutenant Yuna prepared fallback positions and medical stations. Captain Mina set up psychological support networks for each species. Major Varys worked with Lieutenant Raish to position units. They mixed species together, using strengths of each to cover weaknesses of others. Slow-moving Verdants paired with fast Valkyrie. Hive-minded Shardborn provided communication networks for units that spoke different languages. Deepcallers with their sonar sense detected Ravager tunnel movements underground. The Ravagers arrived exactly when predicted. They came as a black tide covering the horizon. Millions of them. The ground shook from their movement. Their clicking mandibles created a sound like thunder. Tail stood at the command center watching the displays. The Ravager force was 3 times larger than intelligence estimated. His defenders were outnumbered 1,000 to 1. All units, this is Colonel Park, he spoke into the command channel. Remember your training. Stay in formation. Cover your partners. And when you feel fear, know that everyone around you feels it too. You are not alone. The Ravagers hit the outer defensive line like a wave against rocks. Blaster fire lit up the battlefield. The first assault lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the outer line had held, but just barely. That night, Tail walked the defensive positions. He saw students cleaning weapons with shaking hands. He saw instructors treating wounded. He saw a Valkyrie cub crying while his Shardborn battle partner sat beside him, vibrating soothing harmonics. He found Lieutenant Raish helping a young Verdant student who had lost a limb. The Verdant would regenerate eventually, but the trauma was fresh. I failed, the Verdant said in his slow speech. I could not move fast enough. My position was overrun. But your fire team held, Raish replied gently. They covered you. That is what teams do. I should be stronger. Strength is not about being perfect, Raish said, and Tail recognized the words he once told Raish. Strength is getting back up. Trying again. The Verdant nodded slowly. I will try again. The second day was worse. The Ravagers attacked from 3 directions simultaneously. A massive Queen Ravager, even larger than the one at the mining colony, directed the assault. She was smart. She probed for weak points. When she found them, she sent overwhelming force there. The northern defensive line began to collapse. A mixed unit of Deep Callers and Valkyrie students panicked. Their rifles fell. They started to retreat in chaos. Major Varus was there instantly. "Hold this line," she roared, but the students were too scared. The Queen Ravager was leading the assault personally, and she was terrifying. Then Staff Sergeant Dong Wu did something unexpected. He walked into the middle of the panicking students and deliberately dropped his own rifle. It clattered on the ground loudly. Everyone stopped and stared at the tough human. Instructor Dong-Wu picked up his rifle slowly and looked at the students. "See? Even instructors drop their weapons sometimes. Now pick up yours and stand with me." One by one, the students picked up their rifles. They formed back into firing lines. They held their position. The battle raged for 3 more days. The academy became a maze of rubble and desperate fighting. Units fell back to secondary positions, then tertiary positions. The Ravagers pushed deeper into the complex. On the 5th day, the Ravagers breached the inner defenses. They were in the heart of the academy, among the dormitories and training halls. Close combat, brutal, terrifying. Tae-il led a reaction force to plug the breach. His command squad included Lieutenant Raish, a Shardborn unit commander named Facet 9, and 3 Deep Caller students. They fought room by room, building by building. Tae-il's rifle overheated and jammed. He dropped it. A young Deep Caller named Kresh picked it up, fixed the jam with his dexterous tentacles, and handed it back. "Try again, sir," Kresh said through his translator. Tae-il smiled grimly and kept fighting, but exhaustion was taking its toll. Tae-il had not slept in 3 days. His hands shook. His vision blurred. He turned a corner and faced 2 Ravagers. He raised his rifle, but his arms were too weak. The weapon dipped. His finger slipped on the trigger. The rifle fell from his hands. The Ravagers charged. Tae-il tried to move, but his body would not respond. Too tired. Too much combat. He had reached his limit. Then Lieutenant Raish was there, putting himself between Tae-il and the Ravagers. The young Valkyrie fired twice and both creatures fell. He reached down, picked up Tae-il's rifle, and pressed it into the colonel's hands. "Try again, soldier," Raish said, echoing the exact words Tae-il once said to him. Tae-il looked at his student. The scared cub who dropped his rifle over a year ago was now saving his instructor's life. "Thank you," Tae-il managed to say. "You taught me to pick up the rifle," Raish replied. "Now you must do the same." On the 6th day, Coalition fleet sensors detected something. The massive Ravager offensive had stripped defenders from other sectors. Coalition forces had broken through and were racing to Gandhara. But they were still 2 days away. The academy had to hold for 48 more hours. The 7th day, the Queen Ravager made her final push. She threw everything at the last defensive perimeter. The academy's main building. This was the last stand. If this fell, everything fell. Every defender who could stand took position. The wounded fought from hospital beds. Students who ran out of ammunition used training weapons. Some just used their hands and claws. Major Haijin coordinated the defense from the command center. "All units, this is it. Everything we have. Everything we are. Show them what we learned here." The Queen Ravager herself entered the main building. She was enormous, her carapace scarred from battles across a dozen worlds. She had killed thousands of Coalition soldiers. Tae-il faced her with a mixed fire team of 5 students. 3 Valkyrie, 1 Shardborn, 1 Verdant. They had trained together for 6 months. They had fought together for 7 days. They fired in perfect coordination. Overlapping fields of fire, covering each other's reloads. The pattern they practiced 1,000 times in training. The Queen Ravager was strong, but she could not withstand focused fire from a perfectly synchronized team. She fell, without their queen. The Ravager swarm lost coordination. They attacked without strategy. The defenders, though exhausted and outnumbered, held their formations. They remembered their training. They picked up fallen rifles and tried again. On the 8th day, Coalition fleet ships entered orbit. Fresh troops dropped to the surface. The battle for Gandhara was over. Final casualty reports came in slowly. Of the 10,000 students who chose to fight, 3,000 had died. 7,000 survived. Every single one of them had dropped their rifle at some point during the siege. Every single one had picked it up again. Te-Il stood in the ruins of the main training hall. Major Haijin found him there, staring at the damage. "The High Command is calling it the miracle of Gandhara," she said quietly. 10,000 students held against millions of ravagers for 8 days. "It was not a miracle," Te-Il replied. "It was training. It was teamwork. It was students who learned to be stronger together than they were alone." Lieutenant Raish approached with a dozen students behind him. "They were wounded, exhausted, but alive, sir," Raish said. "Permission to continue training. We still have a lot to learn." News of the mining colony defense spread through the coalition military like lightning. 25 cubs who failed standard training had held the most dangerous position for 3 days. They had not broken. They had not run. 2 regular Valkyrie divisions wanted to know how this was possible. General Korath stood before the Valkyrie High Command and delivered his report. The chamber was filled with the highest-ranking military officers in the Valkyrie fleet. They listened in silence as Korath described the battle. "The human training methods work," Korath said simply. "I did not believe it at first. I thought acknowledging fear would make our warriors weaker. I was wrong. The cubs fight better because they know fear is normal. They train to function through it rather than pretending it does not exist." An old general named Therex spoke up. "You want us to adopt human methods across our entire military? That would destroy 3,000 years of warrior tradition." "Our tradition is dying with our cubs," Korath replied harshly. "We have lost 40% of our young recruits in the last year." 40%. They freeze in combat because no one taught them what to do when their instincts fail. The humans know how to do this. We should learn from them. The debate lasted for hours. Finally, the High Command made their decision. Human training doctrine would be adopted fleet-wide. Commander Te-Il Park would establish a proper military training academy with full coalition support. 3 weeks later, Te-Il stood on the fortress moon of Gandhara and watched construction crews work on the new academy buildings. The moon orbited a gas giant in a secure system far from the front lines. It was the perfect location for training. Haijin walked up beside him. "Colonel Park," she said with a smile. "Still getting used to the promotion?" Te-Il touched the new insignia on his uniform. The Valkyrie High Command had promoted him to colonel and given him command of the entire training program. Haijin was now a major. Raish, incredibly, had been made a lieutenant and would serve as liaison between human instructors and Valkyrie recruits. "It feels strange," Hill admitted. 3 months ago, I was just an advisor. Now I'm supposed to reform an entire military. "You already did the hard part," Haijin reminded him. "You proved it works. Now we just have to do it on a bigger scale." The academy opened 2 months later. The first class included 500 Valkyrie recruits. But something unexpected happened. Other coalition species requested human instructors too. The Shardborn arrived first. They were crystalline beings, their bodies made of living silicon that reflected light in beautiful patterns. They communicated through vibrations that had to be translated by computer. Their military coordinator, translated as Prism 7, requested a meeting with Te-Il. "Our people face a unique problem," the translator spoke Prism 7's vibrations. "We are a hive-minded species. Individual Shardborn do not experience fear as you understand it. But we experience collective panic. When one of us falls in battle, all Shardborn nearby feel the death through our network. This causes cascade failures where entire units stop functioning." Te-Il listened carefully. "You need training for psychological trauma management?" "Yes, your methods help the Valkyrie cubs manage individual fear. Can you help us manage collective trauma?" It was a good question. Tail brought in Major Haijin and a new member of his team, Captain Mina Song. Mina was a xenopsychologist who specialized in non-human mental processes. Mina studied the Shardborn for 3 weeks. Then she developed a modified training program. Instead of teaching individual resilience, she taught the Shardborn to compartmentalize their hive mind during combat. She created mental exercises where they learned to isolate traumatic signals, so they would not cascade through the whole unit. The Shardborn training was difficult. Their entire culture was built on shared experience. Learning to block parts of their connection felt wrong to them. But Mina was patient and gentle. She showed them this was not about cutting themselves off from each other. It was about protecting each other from overwhelming trauma. Next came the deep callers. They were aquatic beings who lived in pressure suits when outside water. They breathed liquid and communicated through sonar. Their problem was different again. Deep callers had excellent teamwork instincts, but they panicked in open spaces. On their water world, threats came from all directions. In space battles, the emptiness made them feel exposed and vulnerable. Major Haijin developed training modules that used virtual reality to gradually expose deep callers to open spaces while teaching them grounding techniques. She worked with their natural sonar abilities, teaching them to use their sense of spatial awareness as an anchor when panic threatened. Then the Verdants arrived. They were plant-based beings who photosynthesized and moved slowly, but could regenerate from almost any injury. Their military had trouble with speed-based tactics. When enemies moved fast, Verdants simply could not respond in time. They needed training that accounted for their slower reaction speeds. Tail assigned this challenge to Lieutenant Raish. The young Valkyrie had become an excellent instructor. He worked with the Verdants to develop defensive formations that did not require fast reflexes. Instead, they created overlapping fields of fire where slow, steady, accurate shooting from multiple angles overwhelmed faster enemies. The academy grew rapidly. Within 6 months, they had training programs for 7 different species. Each program was unique, adapted to specific biology and psychology. But they all shared core human principles. Fear and weakness were normal. Acknowledge them. Train to function through them. Fight together, not alone. Pick up the rifle and try again. More human instructors arrived from Earth. Staff. Sergeant Dongwoo Kim came with a reputation as the toughest drill instructor in the human military. Lieutenant Yuna Shin specialized in urban combat training. They brought more knowledge and more methods. The academy became something unprecedented in coalition history. Different species training together, learning from each other. A Shardborn unit teaching Valkyrie about network thinking. Deep callers showing Verdant's underwater tactics. Humans teaching everyone about psychological resilience. Captain Varys, who had been promoted to Major, commanded the Valkyrie instructors. She had fully embraced human methods and became one of Tail's most trusted officers. "This place is special," she told Tail one evening as they watched mixed species units training together. "I never thought I would see a Valkyrie and a deep caller working as battle partners. Our cultures do not normally mix well." "Shared struggle creates bonds," Tail replied. "They fight together in training, so they trust each other in battle." 1 year after the mining colony defense, the Academy had graduated 3,000 soldiers from 9 different species. Reports from the front lines were encouraging. Units with human training were suffering 30% fewer casualties. More importantly, they were winning battles that previously would have been losses, but the war was getting worse. The Ravagers had adapted to coalition tactics. They were learning. Intelligence reports showed Ravager forces coordinating in new ways, using strategy instead of just overwhelming numbers. Then came the day that changed everything. A massive Ravager offensive punched through the Krethis sector. 3 full fleet groups were destroyed. The Ravagers moved so fast that evacuation was impossible. System after system fell, and Gandara was directly in their path. The emergency alert woke Tail at 0300 hours. He rushed to the command center and found Major Haijin already there, looking at tactical displays with a grim expression. "The Ravager swarm will reach Gandara in 72 hours, she reported. Coalition Command is ordering evacuation of all non-essential personnel. How many students do we have currently in training? Tail asked. 10,000. From 12 different species. Most are only halfway through their programs. Tail studied the star charts. The nearest coalition fleet was 6 days away. If they evacuated now, the Ravagers would take Gandhara and use it as a staging ground for deeper attacks into coalition space. If they stayed and fought with partially trained troops, most of them would die. Major Varys entered the command center. Behind her came Lieutenant Raish, Staff Sergeant Dongwu, Lieutenant Yuna, and Captain Minna, all of his senior instructors. We need to make a decision, Varys said quietly. The transport ships are ready for evacuation. Tail looked at his team. What do you think? The students are not ready, Minna said honestly. They will panic. Many will die. They will also die if we abandon this position and the Ravagers use it to attack more populated systems, Raish countered. At least here we can fight. Dongwu crossed his arms. I did not become an instructor to run from a fight. If we stay, I stay. Yuna nodded agreement. These kids trust us. We cannot abandon them. Tail turned to Haijin. They had known each other for 20 years. She understood him better than anyone. It is a terrible choice, she said softly, but you are going to choose to fight. I know you. So let us make it official. Tail took a deep breath. Send the message to Coalition Command. We are holding Gandhara. All 10,000 students become active combatants. Every instructor, every staff member, everyone who can hold a weapon joins the defensive line. Sir, Varys said carefully, they will not all survive this. I know, Tail replied, but we will give them the best chance possible. The transport convoy arrived at the mining colony just before dawn. The colony was a collection of industrial buildings surrounding deep excavation sites. 30,000 civilians worked and lived here, mining rare metals for coalition ships. Now they needed to leave, and fast. Tail's experimental squad rode in the last transport with 3 other regular Valkyrie units. The regular warriors kept their distance from the cubs. Some looked at them with pity, others with barely hidden contempt. Everyone knew these were the soldiers who had failed standard training. The cubs felt the judgment. Tail saw it in their lowered ears and tense shoulders, but Raish kept them focused. Check your ammunition, he told his squad mates quietly. Make sure your breathing monitors are working. Stay together. The transport landed and they moved into position. General Korath had assigned Tail's squad to the eastern defensive line, one of the most vulnerable positions. Captain Varys protested this decision, but the general's words were clear. If they are as good as the human claims, they can hold the difficult position. If they are not, better to find out now. Tail knew what this meant. The general was setting them up to fail. The humans and cubs dug in. Tail positioned them in overlapping 3-person fire teams exactly as they had trained. Haijin set up a mobile command post with communication equipment. They had 3 days to hold this position while evacuation ships made multiple trips to remove civilians, the Ravagers. Attacked on the first afternoon. They came as a dark wave. Across the rocky terrain, thousands of chittering creatures moving at terrifying speed. The ground shook from their numbers. The clicking of their mandibles echoed like some horrible mechanical sound. Tail watched his cubs. He saw the fear enter their eyes, saw their paws tighten on their rifles. Several started breathing faster. Their monitors vibrated, reminding them to slow down and breathe deeply. Hold fire until they reach the markers, Tail commanded over the comm. The Ravagers rushed closer. 200 meters, 150, 100. Fire. The defensive line erupted. Blaster bolts cut through the Ravager front ranks. Creatures fell, but more kept coming. Climbing over the bodies of the dead, a young cub named Sola fired her rifle with shaking hands. A Ravager burst through the fire and charged directly at her position. She froze, her rifle dipped, but she was not alone. Kara, positioned to her left, immediately shifted her fire and killed the Ravager. On Sola's right, another cub named Bryn covered the gap in their firing line. Sola, breathe. Raisha's voice came through the cum. You are okay. Keep firing. Sola sucked in air and raised her rifle. Her next shot took down a Ravager that was climbing the defensive barrier. This pattern repeated across the line. When one cub faltered, their fire team covered them. When someone's rifle overheated, their partner provided covering fire during the reload. The training held them together, but the Ravagers kept coming. A section of the defensive wall collapsed under the weight of dead Ravagers and still living ones climbing over them. 6 creatures broke through. They were in the middle of the defensive position, mandibles snapping, moving toward a group of 3 cubs. Tail shot 2. Hyjin got 1 from her position. But 3 Ravagers remained, and they were fast. One of the cubs, a male named Voss, dropped his rifle and stumbled backward. Pure instinct told him to run. Raish sprinted toward him, firing as he moved. He killed 1 Ravager, but his rifle overheated. The second Ravager turned toward Raish, ready to strike. Voss saw his squadmate in danger. Something clicked in his mind. He remembered all the training, all the drills, all the times Tail had said, "You do not fight alone." Voss picked up his rifle and shot the Ravager before it could reach Raish. His hands were still shaking, but the shot was good. "Thank you, brother," Raish gasped. "You picked up my rifle," Voss replied, realizing what Raish had done. "I picked up yours." The battle continued for 3 hours. When the sun began to set, the Ravagers retreated. They always did at dusk, returning to their hives. Tail walked the defensive line, checking casualties. 2 cubs were injured but would survive. The rest were exhausted but alive. Every single one had held their position. Across the cum channel he heard the report from other sections. The regular Valkyrie units had suffered 8 dead and 15 wounded. They had held their positions, but barely. That night, General Korith visited the defensive line. He walked slowly through Tail's position, looking at the cubs. They were cleaning weapons, treating minor wounds, eating rations. They looked tired and scared, but they looked like soldiers. The general stopped in front of Raish. "You dropped your rifle once?" "During the night attack at Forward Base Talon." "Yes, sir," Raish admitted, his ears flat. "Tonight you did not drop it." "No, sir. Tonight I remembered my training." Korith turned to Tail. "Your methods are strange, human. You teach them that fear is acceptable. That weakness can be managed rather than overcome." "I teach them that fear is normal," Tail corrected gently. "And that working together is strength, not weakness." The general was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He placed his paw on Raish's shoulder. "You fought well today, young one. All of you did." After the general left, the cubs looked at each other in amazement. Valkyrie generals did not give praise easily. The second day was worse than the first. The Ravagers came in larger numbers and attacked twice. During the afternoon assault, a massive Ravager nearly 4 times the size of the normal ones appeared. The cubs called it a queen. The queen directed the other Ravagers like a general commanding troops. She sent them in coordinated waves, probing for weaknesses in the defensive line. When she found a weakness in the northern section where regular Valkyrie warriors held position, she sent a massive assault there. The northern line began to collapse. Soldiers fell back in disorder. Some ran. General Korith made a decision. He ordered Tail's experimental squad to reinforce the northern position. "Are you sure, sir?" Captain Varus asked. "They are still cubs?" "They are the only unit that has not broken formation," Korith replied grimly. "Send them?" Tail gathered his 25 cubs. They looked terrified. They could see the chaos at the northern line from their position. "Listen to me," Tail said firmly. "We trained for this. You know what to do? Stay in your fire teams. Cover each other, and remember why we are here. 30,000 civilians need 3 days. We have given them 1.5. We will give them the rest." "Yes, sir." They shouted together. The experimental squad moved to the northern position at a run. They found veteran Valkyrie warriors in complete disarray. Some were injured. Others were frozen with fear, staring at the approaching Ravager horde led by the queen. "Form up!" Ray shouted at the regular warriors. 3-person teams. Now, the veteran Valkyrie stared at this cub, giving them orders. but something in his voice made them obey. Maybe it was confidence. Maybe it was the fact that he was running toward the enemy while they were standing frozen. Tail's squad hit the defensive line and immediately began firing in controlled patterns. Their disciplined volleys cut through the Ravager advance. The regular Valkyrie warriors, seeing the Cubs hold formation, found their own courage returning. They joined the fight. The battle for the northern line lasted until sunset. The Queen. Ravager was killed by a combined fire team led by Kara and Sola. Without their leader, the other Ravagers became confused and retreated. When it was over, the northern line held. 52 regular warriors had been saved by 25 Cubs they once mocked. On the third day, the final evacuation ships arrived. The Ravagers made one last massive assault, throwing everything they had at the colony. Every defensive position faced overwhelming numbers. Tail's squad held the eastern line. They were down to half ammunition and everyone had minor injuries. But they did not break. When Voss finally dropped his rifle from exhaustion, Bryn picked it up and kept firing until Voss could recover. When Kara's position was overrun, Raish and 2 others fought through the Ravagers to pull her back to safety. They fought as a unit. When one fell, another stood up. When fear tried to break them, their training held them together. The last evacuation ship lifted off just as the sun set. All 30,000 civilians were safe. General Korath ordered the full retreat. Every soldier fell back to the transports. Tail counted his squad as they boarded. 23 Cubs remained. 2 had died during the 3-day battle. Every survivor was wounded in some way, but they had held. Against impossible odds, the Cubs that everyone said would fail had held their position for 3 full days. As the transport lifted off, Tail looked at his exhausted squad. Raish sat with his head in his paws. Kara was bandaging Sola's arm. Voss stared out the viewport, quiet and thoughtful. They were not Cubs anymore. They were soldiers. The story of what happened during the night attack spread through forward base Talon like fire. By morning, every soldier knew about the human who picked up a Cub's rifle and told him to try again. Some Valkyrie thought it was an insult. Others thought it was strange. But Raish told everyone who would listen that the human saved his life and gave him back his courage. Tail started training Raish the next morning. They met in an empty corner of the training grounds before sunrise. The young Valkyrie arrived exactly on time, his rifle cleaned and ready. First lesson, Tail said. Forget everything about natural warrior instinct. We are going to train your body to react automatically. Raish looked confused. But sir, Valkyrie combat doctrine teaches us to trust our instincts. And when your instincts tell you to run, what happens? Tail asked. Raish's ears dropped. He remembered dropping his rifle. We will train you until your muscles remember what to do even when your mind is screaming at you to flee, Tail explained. This is how humans fight. We practice the same movements 1,000 times until we do not have to think about them. They spent 3 hours working on basic rifle handling: raise, aim, fire, lower, reload, raise again, over and over. Raish's arms ached, his shoulders burned, but Tail did not let him stop. Again, Tail said each time. Faster, smoother, make it natural. By the end of the session, Raish was exhausted, but something had changed. His movements were cleaner, more automatic. Less thinking, more doing. Word reached General Korath about the training. The general summoned Tail to his office. I told you not to interfere with my troops, Korath growled. Raish asked for training, sir, Tail replied calmly. I am here as an advisor. He came to me. You are teaching him to ignore his warrior instincts. That is dangerous. I am teaching him to function when his instincts fail him, Tail corrected. With respect, General, your Cubs are freezing in combat. Something needs to change. Korath's claws scraped against his desk. The Valkyrie way has worked for 3,000 years. The Valkyrie way worked against enemies that felt fear, Tail said quietly. The Ravagers do not fear anything, they just keep coming. Your young soldiers see that endless swarm and their instincts tell them to run. But there is nowhere to run. The general was silent for a long moment. Finally he spoke. 1 month. Train the Cub for 1 month. If he shows improvement in the next battle, we will discuss expanding your methods. If he fails, you will leave this base. Understood, sir. 3 days later, another human transport arrived at Forward Base Talon. Captain Haijin Choi stepped off the ramp carrying 2 large cases of equipment. She was 35, with sharp eyes and a quick smile. She had been a psychological warfare specialist during the Integration Wars. "Commander," she greeted Tail with a salute. "I hear you are starting a revolution." "I am training 1 soldier," Tail replied. "That is hardly a revolution." "1 soldier now," Haijin said. "But I brought neural training equipment and psychological conditioning programs. If you are going to train them, we should do it properly." Tail smiled. It was good to have backup. Haijin watched Raish train that afternoon. She took notes on everything. How he moved, how he breathed, where his eyes focused when stress increased. "His heart rate spikes when he simulates a charging enemy," she told Tae-il later. "His breathing becomes shallow, classic panic response." "Can you fix it?" Tae-il asked. "Fix? No. Manage?" "Yes." Haijin pulled out a small device. This monitors heart rate and breathing. When his stress levels get too high, it vibrates and reminds him to breathe deeply. We train the body to calm itself automatically. They worked with Raish every day, morning drills with Tae-il, afternoon sessions with Haijin learning breathing control and stress management, evening exercises combining both. The young Valkyrie improved rapidly. Other cubs started watching the training. They gathered at the edge of the training ground, curious. Many of them had also frozen in combat. Many had also felt the shame of dropping their weapons. One afternoon, a cub named Kara approached Tae-il. She was small for a Valkyrie with pale gold fur. "Sir," she said nervously, "could you train me too?" Before Tae-il could answer, 2 more cubs stepped forward, then 5 more. By the end of the week, 23 young Valkyrie soldiers had asked for human training. General Korath was furious. Captain Varys came to Tae-il with a message. "The general says you are undermining traditional Valkyrie military structure," she told him. "He wants you to stop immediately. What do you think, Captain?" Tae-il asked her. Varys was quiet for a moment. "I think our cubs are dying because they are too afraid to fight. I think tradition does not stop Ravager claws. Will you help me train them? If I do, the general will remove me from my position." "That is probably true," Tae-il agreed. Varys looked at the cubs practicing on the training ground. Raish was helping a younger cub with her rifle stance. They were awkward and scared, but they were trying. "I will speak with the general," Varys said finally. "We need a formal training program. Something official." She left. Tae-il waited, unsure what would happen. That night, Varys returned with news. "The general has agreed to a trial program. You may train 1 full squad of 25 cubs. If they perform well in combat, the program expands. If they fail, it ends." "Thank you, Captain." "Do not thank me yet," Varys said. "The older warriors are angry. They say you are making the cubs weak by acknowledging their fear. Some are calling you the human Hushamas cubs." Tae-il nodded. He had expected resistance. The formal training program began the next week. Tae-il, Haijin, and Varys worked with 25 young Valkyrie soldiers who had all failed standard training. They were the scared ones, the ones who dropped their rifles, the ones other soldiers whispered about. Tae-il did not care about whispers. He cared about keeping these cubs alive. They trained for 6 hours every day. Physical conditioning, weapons drills, stress simulation. Haijin taught them breathing techniques and created scenarios where they practiced functioning under fear. Varys taught them small unit tactics that emphasized teamwork over individual glory. The concept of teamwork was strange to the Valkyrie. Their culture honored individual warriors, but Tae-il showed them something different. "When you feel fear, look to your left and right," he told them during a training exercise. "Your squad is there. You do not fight alone. When one of you drops your rifle, another picks it up. You cover each other's weaknesses." The cubs practiced this constantly. Paired drills where one soldier would deliberately freeze and their partner had to take over. 3-person fire teams where they learned overlapping fields of fire. Squad movements where no one advanced until everyone was ready. Slowly, they improved. Raish became Tail's assistant instructor, teaching newer cubs what he had learned. The scared cub who dropped his rifle was becoming a soldier. 6 weeks into training, Captain Varus received intelligence reports. A large Ravager force was moving toward the mining colonies. 50 kilometers from forward base Talon, the colonies held 30,000 civilians who needed evacuation. General Korath called a briefing. We need to hold the colony long enough for evacuation transports to arrive. That means 3 days minimum against a major Ravager assault. He looked directly at Tail. Commander Park, your experimental squad will deploy with the main force. This is their test. Tail nodded. We will be ready. That night, he gathered his 25 cubs. They looked nervous but determined. They had trained hard for this moment. Tomorrow you face the real thing, Tail told them. You will be scared. That is normal. You might drop your rifle. That is okay. Pick it up and try again. Remember your training. Remember your squad, and remember that I believe you can do this. Raish stepped forward. Sir, we will not let you down. The other cubs echoed his words. As Tail watched them prepare their gear, he hoped he was right. He hoped his training would be enough. Because tomorrow, these scared young cubs would face an enemy that never stopped coming. The transport ship shook as it entered the atmosphere of Krethus. Commander Tail Park gripped his seat restraints and watched through the viewport as the war-torn planet grew larger. Smoke rose from a dozen locations across the continent below. Even from orbit, he could see the scars of battle. Tail was 43 years old, with gray streaking his black hair and deep lines around his eyes. He had fought in Earth's integration wars back when humanity first joined the Galactic Coalition. That was 15 years ago. Now the Coalition needed him again. But this time the enemy was far worse than anything Earth had faced. The Ravagers were unstoppable. That was what everyone said. They were insect-like creatures that moved in massive swarms, eating everything in their path, planets, ships, people. Nothing slowed them down. The Coalition was losing badly. The ship landed at forward base Talon with a heavy thud. Tail grabbed his bag and walked down the ramp. The base was a mess of prefabricated buildings surrounded by defense walls. Soldiers moved everywhere, most of them Valkyrie. The Valkyrie were the Coalition's best warriors. At least they used to be. They looked like big cats that walked on 2 legs, covered in fur that ranged from gold to dark brown. They had sharp claws, excellent reflexes, and warrior instincts built into their DNA for thousands of years. They had been unbeatable in combat, but the Ravagers changed everything. A Valkyrie officer approached Tail. Her fur was a deep amber color, and she wore the insignia of a captain. Her ears were flat against her head, a sign of displeasure. Commander Park, she said stiffly. I am Captain Varus. General Korath sent me to escort you. Thank you, Captain, Tail replied in a friendly tone. Varus did not return the warmth. The General wants you to understand something. We did not ask for human advisors. This was a decision made above our level. Tail nodded. He had expected this. The Valkyrie were proud. Having humans teach them about warfare was an insult to their culture. They walked through the base in silence. Tail observed everything. The soldiers looked exhausted. Many had bandages. Some sat alone, staring at nothing. These were the eyes of troops who had seen too much death. Varus led him to the command center where General Korath waited. The general was massive, even for a Valkyrie. His fur was gray with age, and old scars marked his face and arms. Commander Park, Korath growled. You are here because the High Command believes humans can help us. I disagree. The Valkyrie have fought for 3,000 years. We do not need lessons from a species that only learned space travel a century ago. Tail stood at attention. I understand, General. I am here to observe and offer suggestions if requested. Nothing more. Korath's tail twitched. You will observe from the command center. You will not interfere with my troops. Is that clear? Yes, sir. The general dismissed him. Varus showed Tail to his quarters, a small room with a bed and a desk. After she left, Tail unpacked his bag and lay down. He was tired from the journey, but sleep did not come easily. Outside, he could hear the sounds of the base preparing for night watch. The attack came 3 hours. After midnight, alarms screamed across the base. Tail jumped from his bed and grabbed his rifle. He ran outside and saw chaos. The Ravagers had broken through the eastern perimeter. They looked like giant beetles, each one the size of a human, with razor-sharp mandibles and too many legs. They moved fast, climbing over walls and each other in their hunger to reach the defenders. Valkyrie soldiers fired their weapons, and Ravagers fell. But for everyone that died, 2 more appeared. The creatures made horrible clicking sounds as they charged. Tail ran toward the breach. He was not supposed to fight, but instinct took over. He fired controlled bursts, dropping Ravagers as they came. Years of combat experience guided his hands. Then he saw the young Valkyrie soldier. The cub could not have been more than 18 years old. His fur was still soft and unmarked by battle scars. He stood at the defense line, firing his rifle with shaking hands. A Ravager charged directly at him, its mandibles clicking. The young Valkyrie fired and missed. Fired again and missed. The Ravager got closer. The cub's eyes went wide with pure terror. His rifle fell from his hands and clattered on the ground. He froze completely, unable to move or breathe. The Ravager was 5 meters away. 4 meters, 3. Tail sprinted forward and shot the Ravager through its head. The creature collapsed at the cub's feet. The young Valkyrie stood there, trembling, staring at the dead insect. Without saying anything, Tail bent down and picked up the fallen rifle. He checked the weapon, made sure it was still working, and then held it out to the cub. The young Valkyrie looked at him with shame and fear in his amber eyes. "Try again, soldier," Tail said calmly. The cub stared at him. Then slowly, he reached out and took the rifle. His paws were still shaking, but he gripped the weapon and raised it to his shoulder. Another Ravager appeared over the wall. This time, the cub fired. The shot hit the creature in the thorax and it fell. "Good," Tail said. "Keep firing." The cub did. His shots were not perfect, but he kept shooting. The terror in his eyes was still there, but so was determination. The battle lasted 2 more hours. When dawn came, the Ravagers retreated. They always did when the sun rose. The base had held, but 53 soldiers had died. Tail helped with the wounded and then returned to his quarters. His uniform was covered in blue Ravager blood. He was too tired to care. 3 hours later, there was a knock on his door. Tail opened it and found the young Valkyrie cub from the battle. Up close, Tail could see he was even younger than 18. Maybe 16. "Sir," the cub said quietly, "my name is Raish. I wanted to thank you, and to apologize for my cowardice." "You did not run," Tail said. "That is not cowardice." "I dropped my rifle," Raish said, his ears flat with shame. "A Valkyrie warrior does not drop his weapon." Tail studied the young soldier. "Have you been in combat before last night?" "No, sir. Last night was my first real battle." "Then you did well. Fear is normal. What matters is what you do with it." Raish looked surprised. "But the other officers say fear is weakness." "Fear is information," Tail replied. "It tells you there is danger. The trick is learning to act despite the fear, not pretending it does not exist." The cub thought about this. "Sir, would you train me? I want to learn the human way of fighting." Tail knew this could cause problems with General Korath, but when he looked at Raish, he saw a soldier who wanted to be better. That was worth the risk. "Report to me at 0600 tomorrow," Tail said. "Bring your rifle." Raish's ears perked up. "Yes, sir." "Thank you, sir." As the young Valkyrie walked away, Tail wondered what he had just started. He did not know then that this one simple act would change everything.